ConnectWise is in the news this week, and itSynergy CEO Michael Cocanower is here to help us break it all down, plus a special guest interview with security expert Ian Thornton-Trump on the principles of security leadership and the security landscape today. It's ChannelPro Weekly number 190, Box Lunch Analysis. Hello and welcome to ChannelPro Weekly, episode 190. My name is Matt Whitlock, technology editor, online director, and your host of this fine program for you. And who are you? Well, you are the VARs, the MSPs, the integrators, the IT integrators, I should say, the MSSPs, the IT consultants, the ethical hackers, the system builders. You might be one of those things. You might be all of those things. And if you are all of those things, you are probably a very tired individual, and I urge a nap right after you're done listening to this show. But assuming that you're awake, we got a good show ahead for you. Now, joining me from the road is our man of the hour, the executive editor here at ChannelPro, Rich Freeman.
Greetings from Orlando.
Now, Rich, you are not all of those things, but I'm willing to bet you took a nap anyway.
I do love a good nap.
Who doesn't these days? You know what? We're all so worked to death that we need extra rest and relaxation. We can get it. And even though you're on the road, it is not for rest and relaxation. Where you at, Rich? What are you doing?
So I have been attending the IT Nation Secure event. This is a ConnectWise event. Technically, it's the second time they're doing it. The first time last year was virtual because there were no face-to-face events going on, but they did it with actual live three-dimensional human beings this year, and that's what I've been doing this week.
So is it really weird for you to be out in like a place now? Like, were you like walking up to people and like poking them and being like, "Wow, this is a thing here"?
But, you know, I got here just in time for the opening night reception, and there was a lot of that going on. A lot of people kind of milling around the room. It's like, wow, that, you know, real people, you know, in the same room, fully dimensional, and yeah, it was different, but it was great.
So did anybody like cough or sneeze and then like half the room like run to the walls and cover up like this?
No, actually, you know, I mean, and I was kind of waiting to see what the whole kind of mask situation was going to be in some, because there were some guidelines distributed in advance that implied, you know, we were going to be expected maybe, but no, it's sort of like our event in Dallas a couple of weeks ago. People are just kind of doing it the old way. Yeah, it was great. It was just, I saw a lot of people I haven't seen in a long time.
Well, awesome stuff. I'm glad you're out and about. Is it nice to be back on the road? I remember, you know, before all this stuff hit last year, you were almost always on the road. You were very rarely home. So is this nice, or are you kind of like, oh man, like this is real again. I got to be gone all the time. Are you happy about this, or are you not happy about it?
I'm mostly happy. I mean, I am happy, just period. I like travel. I like the people I see on the road. I get a lot out of these events. The only reason I sort of, you know, hesitated a little bit there is I was talking to somebody about that at the show this week. I had forgotten how sort of physically taxing these events are. Like, I did more walking this week than I have in a year and a half, just moving around, meeting to meeting, session to session. I just had forgotten all about that. So it is a little bit tiring, but well worth it.
You need to get back into conference shape.
That's exactly right. Yeah, yeah.
And a nap, as we've already talked about. Also very important. So who's that's joining us there? I'm excited to say we've got a guest host joining us this week. Really excited to have him back. He's the founder and president of itSynergy, which focuses exclusively on providing strategic technology management for small and mid-sized organizations. He's a certified ethical hacker, counseling customers of the world on cybersecurity and risk management, and also serves on numerous boards and advisory councils, the Arizona chapter of Entrepreneurs Organization. Please welcome back Michael Cocanower. Welcome, Michael.
Hey guys, how are you? Glad to be back. Thanks for having me.
Awesome to have you back. You know, we were talking about conferences and we're talking about traveling again. Now, the last time you were on, it was July of last year. So we were still right in the thick of all the coronavirus lockdowns and everything like that. So So just before you kind of dive in a little about you, just tell us a little bit like how are you doing these days? Are you getting out too? Are you traveling again? What's going on in your life?
100%. I have so much pent up travel energy. It's unbelievable. It's funny because if you go back pre-pandemic, it's like, oh, another trip. Gosh, I can't. I'm on. It's just now. It's like, oh, please let me get out of here. I mean, especially I'm in Phoenix where it's been like 100. It was 118 degrees last week, so I have a lot of pent up travel energy. Absolutely.
118 degrees. I heard a little bit about that. Is that like literally walking outside and feeling like a lobster about to be boiled alive?
Well, if we went outside when it was that hot, I could answer that question, but we don't. So I don't really know the answer to that question.
Everybody just goes inside and hides in fear. Is that what it is?
Yeah, the thing is, in the 8 seconds that it takes you to leave your air conditioned office and get in your air conditioned car, the 118 doesn't really have full effect.
So in Arizona, so like I live in the Midwest, right? So like during the winter time, I know if you're out somewhere or at work, you hit the button on your car and you like let your car warm up before you get into it. Is it the opposite in Arizona? Like, do people go and they start their cars remotely to cool them down before they get in?
A lot of people do. Absolutely.
Wow, that's crazy. What a different world down there in hell, I guess is what you would call it, 118 degrees. I don't know what other word for it.
Well, we would call it that, but we call it something else when it's, December and January and it's 75 degrees and we're walking around in shorts and flip-flops.
That's the other nice part. Yep. You got to take the good with the bad, I suppose.
Yeah.
Not many areas on Earth with perfect weather. And certainly not Seattle, right, Rich?
The interesting thing is we're talking about temperatures and weather in Seattle. So I'm in Florida, and I think the forecast high today is in the low or mid 80s or something like that. After we do the show, I'm flying back home to Seattle. They're expecting 100 degrees there over the weekend, which, compared to 118, no big deal. But there is practically no such thing as residential air conditioning in Seattle. So it's going to be hot the next few days.
You might just want to change your ticket, stay in Florida where it's cooler, which is a really, really weird thing to say, and hang there a couple of days. So, well, awesome stuff. So, Michael, I'm really glad to have you back. Why don't you, for those who maybe missed the last time you were on, tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Yeah, so like you mentioned at the outset, my company is itSynergy. I started the company back in 1997. Managed services provider serving small and mid-sized businesses, probably a little bit more of a tilt, especially from a revenue standpoint towards the mid-size of that. So kind of 100 to 300, 400, maybe even 500 PC realm, but also some smaller folks too, down to, I think our smallest is probably around 10 or 15. Really excited for today. We're super, super focused on security. And so I love to talk about security. Like you mentioned, I'm a certified ethical hacker, which I always say means I have all of the skills of the bad guys, but I use my powers for good instead of evil.
And how do we know you really do that though? Have you ever used your powers for Nefar, even just to prank somebody?
I can neither confirm nor deny that statement.
Probably smart. Well, great to have you on. So for a little bit of background, how did you come to be a certified ethical hacker?
Yeah, I think a number of years ago, and I know we're going to spend a lot of time talking about this today, especially with a lot of the announcements coming out of the ConnectWise conference where Rich is. Obviously security is a big topic. I think we saw that coming a number of years ago. And so I really made a strategic decision 5-ish years ago, something like that. Like, wow, this is kind of where things are going. And, this problem is going to get a lot worse. And of course, we've seen that. There have been numerous examples over the last couple of months, the Colonial Pipeline, the meat packing, all that kind of stuff. And so, I just figured like, hey, there are lots of whatever Chinese proverbs and Sun Tzu and Art of War and all that kind of stuff. Know thy enemy, all those sorts of things. So I figured, I probably better know what the tactics are that they're using in order to know how to fight it. And it doesn't mean that it's easy. And of course, there's no silver bullet when it comes to cybersecurity. And it's an interesting position to be in, because the thing that I always tell people is, the bad guys can try 1,000 different things and they only have to be right once. I have to be right all 1,000 times. And so it definitely is a challenge.
And what's the training for that? Like, is that something you were into when you were a youth, like learning the hacking scene as computers kind of evolved, or did you put an ad out on Craigslist, like, hacking instructor wanted, like how does that work?
Yeah, so there's actually an organization, EC Council, that puts out the certification, and they literally teach you the skills to be a hacker, even down to there was a module in the instruction about dumpster diving. And what kind of information you can get out of there, and reassembling shredded pieces of paper, and all kinds of so literally all of the skills that a traditional black hat hacker would use, they teach you all that stuff.
Wow. And what kind of controls are there to make sure that, like, you don't just become a certified hacker? Like they teach you to be the bad person and you just go to be the bad person. Is there any control in that? I'm very curious about this.
I mean, you're contractually bound. You have to sign a number of agreements related to ethics and other things like that. But at the end of the day, I guess that's one of the characteristics of bad guys, right? Like, they don't care what they sign or what they're bound by or what the law says. So I suppose that is a possibility.
I'm curious, because I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who have put in time and done the homework to get good at security, who don't have that sort of hacking training. So, I mean, can you think of instances or ways in which being able to think like a hacker has helped you do a better job of protecting businesses?
Oh, 100%. I mean, we had an incident, let's see, at this point, it's probably about 8 or 9 months ago, where we did have a customer experience a breach. And the actual kind of finalization of the breach, if you will, occurred about 3 o'clock in the morning, local time. And there was a period of probably 2 hours or so where we were actively engaged with the threat actors on the network at the same time. And we were kind of going back and forth, like they would disable our accounts, we would re-enable and then disable their accounts. I mean, there was like literally an active battle happening for like an hour or two. And we were able to mitigate a large part of the impact of their attack as a result of the actions we took. So I think that's a perfect example of where that skill set really came into play.
This is like a scene right from a movie. That's so cool.
It was. Yeah, I mean, kind of like the Matrix fight scene, except we were on 2 different sides of the globe.
and instead of swords and guns, it's Mountain Dew and Doritos.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly.
Very, very cool stuff. So Michael, so when you're not hacking and trying to thwart off threat actors, you're a pretty active person, from what I understand, right? What kind of things do you like to do?
I like to run. So a normal week for me is about 50 to 60 miles of running time. So I like to do that. And then at the moment, I'm engaged in something super fun. So I volunteer at an animal rescue on the weekends. And at the moment, I am fostering a mama dog and 6 puppies. So I got them when they were about 2 weeks old, and I will have them up until next week when they go in to get their surgery to get fixed, and then they'll eventually go up for adoption. So I have a house full of puppies right now, which is tremendously entertaining. The big innovation this week is they have learned to jump, and they're very, very proud of themselves for their jumping. So looking at them in the pen, it's like watching popcorn pop. They're just little jump, 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 jump. They're very happy about that skill.
And so if you could
breed is this?
Say that again.
What breed is this?
It's just a mutt. I mean, they found a stray that was pregnant, and the county did, and they asked our shelter to do them a solid and foster until she had the babies and was able to get fixed. And so our shelter took her on, and I'm fostering them.
Awesome. Now, is there any way to train dogs to be ethical hackers? You could have your army of hacking dogs.
I hadn't thought about that, but that's an excellent point. Like puppies that have just learned to jump, I think I've got to. That's a great. When we're done here, I'm gonna figure out how we can do that.
We might need to get some custom designed keyboards though that work well with little paws.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I love it. Well, awesome stuff. Thank you so much for being here and for joining us again here on the show, which is going to be an exciting show. So Rich mentioned that he's at a ConnectWise event. So we've got a lot of ConnectWise news this week. We're going to talk about a story called "Now's the Time to Advance to Azure 201." That'll be a pretty good article to discuss there. We did an interview a little earlier with Ian Thornton-Trump. Unfortunately, Michael Cocanower wasn't able to join us on that, but we will take a listen to that interview and a whole lot more. So strap in, and we're gonna get started right now. And I can't talk today, Rich, as we're doing the show earlier in the day, and I'm just maybe I haven't had enough coffee yet, and I'm tripping over my own brain. Let's see if that improves over the course of the show. Although I'm going to bet against myself. Rich, ConnectWise warns MSPs get serious about security soon. Is there people out there that is not serious about security, like in the slightest? Like, oh, this security thing, like, we don't care.
You know what? That is an excellent question. And if we had, some of the ConnectWise folks who spoke at this event on, they would have a lot to say about that, because that goes straight to really the reason they created IT Nation Secure and what they have been really kind of emphasizing with the attendees here at this event. So I should say IT Nation Secure is it originated as a partner community within ConnectWise. They launched it in 2020. And it really is 100% around enabling ConnectWise partners to, create and successfully run a security practice. And so, I mean, there wasn't a lot of really big news announced at the conference here. ConnectWise has hired a new kind of senior executive to run their cybersecurity product business. They rolled out a cyber research unit. They now have their own threat intelligence organization, which they're very, very excited about. But really, the big thing they wanted to talk about to attendees here was this idea of truly getting serious about security. And I say truly because you're right. Everybody understands security is a big issue. Everybody is wrestling with that all the time. And everybody is offering security services to their customers, but not everybody is really investing in the skills and the know-how to be a true, I hate to say it, like a security trusted advisor to their customers. So let me just give you some statistics that ConnectWise published this week to kind of illustrate why, from their perspective, and I'm putting words in their mouth, but from their perspective, security is kind of do or die stuff for MSPs right now. And we'll start with the die piece, because they went out and they, and this is the third year in a row they did this, they went out and they surveyed a bunch of SMBs. 92% of the SMBs they spoke to said that they would either hire or fire and then switch to a different MSP based solely on the security offering. For the right security offering, 92% of SMBs would that would govern who they choose, or it would inspire them to switch to a different MSP. And 34% of the SMBs surveyed said that they would be willing to pay more for managed services from somebody who can really do security for them effectively. So everybody takes security seriously, right? Well, another statistic from this research, of those SMBs surveyed, only 7% say that they hear from their IT provider regularly about security. And so, as ConnectWise put it to me in an interview this week, your customers want to talk with you about security. They're reading about Colonial Pipeline and JBS, and they're concerned about the implications for their business. They want to have a serious conversation with their MSP about security, and only 7% of them are having anything even resembling that. And I think the ConnectWise folks would say that even in a lot of those conversations, the MSP comes to the table prepared to talk about products. And that's not really the conversation that you need to be having with the customers. You need to be, talking about risk assessment and prioritization, and you need to be talking about policies, and it's not just a product conversation. So IT Nation Secure is all about providing the resources and instruction and assistance that MSPs need to become more serious about security. And the big story at the event this year is that theme that you may be offering security to your customers, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're prepared to satisfy that demand for the right security solution that 92% of SMBs might leave you for if you don't have it.
Well, that's the most surprising statistic in here. And I think, Michael, you'll agree with this. This basically just says that 92% of SMBs, 92% of customers out there are up for grabs. Go get some.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And we are, I mean, this is happening with us today. I mean, we are fortunate that we've made the investment in training and in personnel related to cybersecurity. And literally, I'm onboarding a customer July 1 that the way we got them is they were breached. Their insurance company actually brought us in as kind of local feet on the ground during the incident response to kind of help get them back in business. That was probably 2 or 3 months ago. And they now have called us back and just said, yeah, our existing guy is just not cutting it from a cybersecurity standpoint. Exactly what ConnectWise is talking about here. And we want to work with you. And I don't know what they were spending on the existing guy, but I know it was nowhere near what they're going to spend with us because we kind of have this conversation when we take over from these smaller providers that, listen, think about IT support as a spectrum. You're on the extreme low end of the spectrum now, and our services with the cybersecurity suite and everything that we bring is on the high end of the spectrum. Are you really ready to make that change? Like, have you gone through the mental mind shift where security is really important to you? And like, we're finding people are saying yes. And a lot of times adding an extra zero onto the end of their monthly spend, but we're coming with a full package of cybersecurity technologies and expertise.
So, and the statistic here was 34% willing to pay more. That does show a slight disconnect from the 92, though. Like 92 want an effective MSP, but only 34% are willing to pay for it. Is that how you read that, Rich, Michael, or are you reading that as 34% of people are willing to pay more, but those who are not in that 34% just want an MSP that maybe does a better job?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the answer to that. And obviously I'm not to challenge the data, but just from an anecdotal standpoint, I think 34% is low. I mean, what we're finding when we sit down and have these conversations with these customers and talk about, here's why it's more, because, and there are a couple of key things. I mean, so certainly part of it is product focused, right? So I'm going to bundle a lot more products, cybersecurity focused products in there, like EDR and SIM and all these other things that you don't have today. So a part of the higher cost is certainly product, and that's very easy for them to get. But the other thing that I tell these customers is kind of like the story that I told earlier. It's 3 a.m. and your network is being breached. You're going to call your IT provider. Who do you want on the other end of that call? Do you want somebody like us who we've been through this before? We know exactly what to do, who to call, what order to do things in, who we need at the table in terms of attorneys and incident response and forensics and all that kind of stuff? Or, do you want to call your existing guy who is kind of a one-man show or one-woman show and, has never done this before? And that is what I tell people, like, that's really what you ought to make your decision on. Who do you want on the other end of that phone at 3 a.m.?
Rich, who would you want on the other end of that phone at 3 a.m.?
Well, I mean, if I ever do get hammered that way, I'll just call Michael.
There you go.
I know exactly where I'm. Isn't it interesting, Michael? I mean, and it's not like this is all behind us, but I mean, it always was the story. A year, 2, 3 years ago, that the big money-related issue in security was, how do I get my customer to spend the money that I know they need to be spending to better protect themselves? And all of a sudden now, it's like they're stepping up. But at least the ones who understand, the smarter ones, are more than willing to spend extra if it means that it's going to keep their business alive.
They are, but I do want to clarify, like, it does not mean that there's just an open checkbook, money grows on trees, money is no object, that type of thing. It is still, to some degree, a gradual process, which for us is driven by risk management. And so for us, we take our customers through this constantly repeating cycle of risk assessment, analysis, mitigation. Assessment, analysis, mitigation. And so on an annual cycle with our customers, we're taking them through, and we're starting out with an assessment of their risk. And we go through 50, 60 some points on their network, all kinds of different things from physical security to, all different risks. And we assign a score through kind of a proprietary method that we have, and then we stack rank that stuff. And so each year we decide, like, okay, the top 4 things on the list is what we're going to work on this year. And then, of course, as you address those things, now 4 new things are going to pop up to the list. And so we're going to address those next year. So it's not that we just go to the customer and go, okay, here's a list of 60 things. You need to do all this at once. Like, that's not going to fly. We've got to prioritize. And then, the other thing is you got to have a discussion with your customer, because this is a lot like buying insurance, right? When I meet with my insurance guy every year, he tells me, 400 things that could possibly go wrong. And I go, okay, well, I want to protect against 280 of those, and the other 120, I'm going to take my chances because I think the probability is so low. And it's very similar with technology risk. Sometimes a customer just says, like, I understand the risk. It's not worth me spending that money to do something about it. And so I'm just going to live with the risk. And from our standpoint, we just look at it as it's our responsibility to ensure that our customers are making a fully informed decision, whatever that decision happens to be.
We've talked several times on the show about, about stickiness of managed services. And when you're talking about there about making informed decisions, it's interesting that you might be working with a customer who might take on. There's a question there about how much risk you're willing to let a customer endure while wanting them to be your customer. That's an interesting path I think I might want to go down. But I was also thinking about the stickiness of managed services. Like, we've been telling IT providers for years and years and years, like, you got to make your services sticky. And what we're seeing from the data is that just because you have somebody on a fixed recurring monthly cycle with various IT products and solutions, that may not be sticky enough. Like, is security the glue that holds all that together?
I think security can be. I don't think it's only about security. I mean, again, it kind of goes back to what I talked about earlier. It's that concept of who do you want on the other end of the phone at 3 a.m.
The answer to that is Domino's, because if you're on the phone at 3 a.m. dealing with an incident response, you're going to need a lot of pizza. That's
very true. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. But I mean, to me, I don't mean to repeat myself, but that's the most important thing is the level of expertise of the person that is there when you need them the most. That doesn't mean that you can't create any stickiness with security. I mean, we've done a lot of things with our RMM tools and other things like that, where we're monitoring, looking for specific things that are, indicators of potentially malicious activity. Obviously, we've got a SOC that's monitoring all these tools, all these different data feeds we're getting from both cloud services and on-premise services. I think potentially there's some stickiness there, but I don't think it's only about security. I mean, I think you need to create stickiness across the entire stack.
Yeah, and it's not just about security for your customers too. There's also a lot of going on about the security for MSPs themselves and the breaches that have been happening there. And Rich, ConnectWise is reporting some progress on that. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, you're alluding to an article I wrote this week at the show, and I should say this isn't a theme that ConnectWise was emphasizing particularly here at the conference, but I kind of arrived here wanting to talk with them about it, and I'll tell you exactly what kind of brought it to mind. So I think we're all aware of the fact that for some time now, MSPs have been targeted by hackers. Hackers have figured out there are credentials. There's all sorts of great information about multiple businesses in, say, an RMM system, and so that has made MSPs and their software targets for attackers. And when we were doing our show, our conference in Dallas a couple of weeks ago, I was moderating a panel on zero trust security. And one of the panelists was Bruce McCulley, who, by the way, was at the conference here. It was nice to see him in the flesh again. But he was one of the panelists on stage with us in Dallas, and he runs an MSSP. And so some of his customers are MSPs. And I remember him mentioning that when his team goes into MSP environments and looks around, he sees some really kind of alarming mistakes and lapses and just kind of sloppiness in terms of configuration and setting and so on. I mean, stuff that probably a lot of these MSPs wouldn't let their customers get away with, but they're too busy to sort of properly harden their own environment and so on. And so when I came here, I asked for an opportunity to meet with Tom Greco, who is the Chief Information Security Officer at ConnectWise. And protecting RMM systems, PSA systems, that is very much a shared responsibility. So the software developers have a lot to do to make sure that these tools are safe, but so do MSPs. And I kind of wanted to get his take on the state of play right now in terms of MSPs being aware of the threats that they face and how sort of diligent, rigorous are they being about responding to that. And, he characterized it as a mixed bag. He said there are sort of three camps right now that MSPs fall into. And there are the people who, are fully aware in all its depth of what's going on, and they're dealing with it. There are the people, he said, who think they're aware, but aren't really doing everything that they should be doing to protect themselves. And then there is that camp still of people who just really don't kind of understand the kind of jeopardy that they're in. And I would say that in hallway conversations with folks here, vendors I'm thinking about in particular, who are really kind of deep on security, there are probably more of those people who should be more concerned about this than there ought to be. A lot of awareness, maybe not as much sort of engagement with the issue as there should be. And a lot of it, Tom was saying, comes down to basics. So, I mean, what he would advise MSPs to do is pick a framework. It could be NIST. It could be one of the other ones out there, and apply that to your business. You may or may not already be having framework discussions with your customers, but you should be doing that internally as well. But really, a lot of it just, kind of comes down to basics. Password hygiene, MFA. Tom said a majority of MSPs are probably using MFA with their RMM and PSA, and so, but there are still some out there who aren't. Privilege management. Have you gone through all your systems, looked at all, who has an account on these tools? What kind of privileges do they have? Have you minimized the privileges that you need to get? So there's a lot of stuff that, again, people are probably doing with their customers that they may not be doing with themselves, that they really need to be thinking about in a more serious kind of way, because MSPs are like target number one right now for hackers.
And that makes sense, right? I mean, the keys to the castle, right? And then within that, you have keys to a bunch of other castles. So Michael, does it surprise you that there would be so many MSPs out there that aren't protecting themselves first? Like, how can you protect your customers if you can't protect yourself?
Yeah, I don't understand that at all. I mean, if I was to make a list of the things that keep me up at night, I think this is at the top of the list. Like, I get accused of wearing a tinfoil hat around the office and all kinds of stuff. Like, I am super, super, super paranoid about this, and just like relentless when it comes to securing our own internal environment. And I agree 100% with what you said. Like, you got to practice what you preach. And in my opinion, there's no reason not to, because, I mean, before we're rolling out a new technology to our customers, whether it's like, something like a Duo for two-factor authentication or whatever it might be, or a LastPass Enterprise or whatever, like, implement it in your own organization first and see how it goes, get it fine-tuned, get it tweaked, all that kind of stuff. Because yeah, I mean, this just absolutely freaks me out. I mean, especially I don't remember. I think it was a year and a half ago when Kyle and the guys over at Huntress found that that guy that was advertising MSP credentials for $600 on the dark web. And I mean, literally, I read that and I was like, wow, I'm literally $600 away from being out of business. And like, the all the work and sweat and blood and tears that I put into building this company, I'm $600 away from it going away. And so how people like cannot be aware of that risk and concerned about it and worried about it and working on it literally every day is a mystery to me. I don't get it at all.
And so 73%, according to this, of MSPs that they surveyed had suffered at least one security incident in the last 12 months. Now, Rich, did they define security incident, or does that mean like an actual breach?
So I should, that's coming from a report that Perch is part of ConnectWise, and they published an MSP threat report, I want to say in April, and I don't recall how deep they got into defining security incident, but they probably clarified what they mean by that.
Does that seem like that seems like an awfully high number, or are MSPs really under that much attack all the time?
I mean, so let's clarify though. I mean, one thing to remember, and we experienced this challenge ourselves internally, right? So let's take like a phishing email, right? Unlikely that you're gonna convince a guy like me to click a link in a phishing email and give up credentials or open a document or whatever. But not everybody that I have working here is technical, right? I have finance people, I have administrative people that are non-technical users, and so, the same challenges that all of our customers face in terms of teaching non-technical users to recognize a phishing email and what's okay to click on and what's not okay to click on, like we face as well. I don't need to worry so much about my engineers, but I do have people here I need to worry about. So, I mean, maybe that is reasonable for that reason, because there are so many ways in, and it's such a desirable target.
And you said, so in $600, you saw credentials online. Is that still the weakest link is still the person, right? Like you can have all of these tools and technologies in place to thwart off attack. And as a hacker, that is certainly a vector for a threat, but is it still the low hanging fruit that a lot of the threat actors go after?
I say 100%. The weakest part of any system is the human being. Now, that can be applied broadly. So for example, if we look at, a lot of the larger, highly publicized breaches that have happened over the last few years, it's like, well, this firewall had a security exploit and it wasn't patched for 9 months by this company. So I would kind of call that human error, right? Like if something needs to be patched and you don't patch it, then as an IT person in the IT department of some company, like you're not doing your job. So I would kind of call that human error. But then there's also the human error about, social engineering and phishing and all those other types of things too. But yeah, absolutely. The weakest part of any, like, I'm not going to be able, as a bad guy, like it is not going to be easy for me to, for example, hack a fully patched sonic wall firewall, for example, right? If I just going to come in from the outside and I'm going to go against that sonic wall and do everything I can, like, okay, you can try it. Good luck. Maybe if you're working for what's the name of the Russian secret service, the new name of the KGB, whatever it is, like maybe if you're one of those dudes, you can do it, but the average hacker is not going to be able to do that. But like, can I get your admin assistant to give up his or her credentials? Probably.
Yeah. And now tell me, when you saw credentials for an employee for $600, were you somewhat insulted that it was that cheap?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, you'd like to think that you're more than $600 away from being put completely out of business. I mean, but I guess different people have different economics, I suppose. I mean, and this was, from a former employee at this MSP. So, like, wow. I mean, I would hope that I pay my people well enough that they'd have to be more than $600 to make a difference in their lives.
What would an acceptable number be? Like if you were browsing offers from the nefarious to buy credentials for your business, would $15,000 the credentials, like what is the number where you'd be like,
I'm thinking
hey,
like
I'm worth something.
I'm thinking if that had 3 more zeros on the end of it, I'd be like, yeah, okay, all right.
Rich, how much are your credentials worth? What would you find to be an acceptable number? Like, you know what? That's cool that they're selling it for that price.
Well, I mean, I don't know what that number is, but I mean, what are my credentials worth? What's somebody going to get if they steal my credentials, basically? You know what they'll get? They'll get into my email account and they'll receive a flood of press releases every day.
Right. And once you start getting the flood of press releases, it never stops.
Exactly.
They'll
pay me to, change my credentials.
I like this. That's a new, you know what? There might be a new security model there, Michael. Like you could start a service that ends up spamming hackers to death until they pay you to stop spamming them.
So here's the thing, like you talked earlier about stickiness, right? And one of the things that we can do to be sticky is use automation inside our RMM. So maybe I need to build some automation that when we detect a breach, I just automatically sign you up for every press release service I can possibly find in order to discourage you.
It would work. It would work for me. I can say that for sure.
Sounds sticky, right? I mean,
right.
Yeah.
It does. I like this. This is a new business opportunity here that we need to explore.
Absolutely.
So Rich, we'll move on here. And the next story, when I read the title of this and I started to kind of browse over, like, this is another one of those elusive single pane of glass stories, where they're trying to consolidate everything into one window, which will ultimately just be another window. But what is going on with this new single pane of glass?
So this is something we're referring to something that ConnectWise actually announced last week before the conference. They announced that they launched a new product called ConnectWise Recover Complete. And ConnectWise Recover is their BDR platform, and they have full-blown business continuity. They have endpoint backup. They've got cloud to cloud. They have now added a fourth element or component to Recover called Recover Complete. And that's basically meant to be that single pane of glass for managing third-party BDR solutions. So they have some data. They say that nearly 60% of MSPs are currently supporting 3 or more BDR products. And it might have to do with customers of different sizes, customers with different needs, different budgets, whatever. But it's pretty common for MSPs, according to ConnectWise, to have multiple BDRs that they're working with, and therefore, theoretically, it would be pretty convenient to have one place that you could go to manage all those systems simultaneously. And that's what this new product is meant to be. Now right now they sort of have this one launch partner. Acronis is the first vendor signed up to be a part of this interface. There are apparently others coming shortly, and so how useful this tool is obviously going to depend on how many different vendors integrate with it and so on. We'll kind of have to see how that goes down the road. But part of why I kind of put this on the list of topics that we speak about this week is I kind of wanted to get Michael's read on how big a need is this kind of system, and how sort of excited do you get to hear that there's now a product brand new and still kind of evolving that specifically is designed to consolidate the BDR management task.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's potential here. Clearly, it is extremely important what you talked about, which is, okay, great, Acronis is there. Who else is coming, and when are they coming, and what's the time frame of that? I'm especially interested to see, because the way that I look at it now, there's almost like this, within the, let's call it the IT tools or MSP tools space, there's kind of this war between these 3 different private equity giants, right? So like a King Kong versus Godzilla versus, I don't know who the third one is, but so you've got like the ConnectWise and their PE backed, and then you've got like the Datto, Autotask, and their PE backed, and then you've got Kaseya and you know everything that they're buying, and all three of them are on these massive buying sprees. And so the interesting thing, like with the ConnectWise thing, is like, is Datto going to be one of the products that integrates into this, or because you have this Godzilla versus King Kong, you know, Datto's going to kind of, you know, turn their nose up and say, no, we're not playing. Same thing with Kaseya. And so, like, to me, that's the first thing we got to think about is like, you know, to your question, and I'll get to it in a second. Like, yeah, I do think this is an interesting idea. It's the execution that I really wonder about. Like, okay, Acronis, lovely, but you know, I mean, 6 months from now, is it going to be Acronis and one other, or you know, because it doesn't really become interesting to me until you've got a lot of vendors in there, and until we see if some of the giants like the Dattos are going to play along with this. All of that being said, so let's just assume for the sake of discussion that they get like everybody we can think of, right? Like the top 20 BDR vendors, they get to play along, which is a pretty big assumption, but let's just assume that for the sake of discussion. I mean, the devil's in the details. I do think there's potential. I'm optimistic about the announcement. I think it's a good idea. I think there is a need there for this type of management. But the devil is in the details. So, you know, I'd really want to know, like, okay, well, you know, how is it going to report, and can I alert on it, and does it integrate with my, you know, ticketing system, and, you know, all these other types of things. So I think there's a lot of detail left to work out. But just conceptually, like, if you came to me and said, hey, you know, do you think there's a need for a single pane of glass management across multiple third-party backup solutions? I would say it's interesting. Tell me more. And I think, you know, that combined with, okay, how many people are you going to have on in what time frame are kind of the two big questions yet to be answered related to this.
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree. There is the concept, and then there, like you said, there's the execution. And so, and you know, and we'll see. I am very curious as well to see how cooperative the other vendors are. And you mentioned Datto in particular. I should say Datto not only was exhibiting at the show here this week, but they had a speaking slot. But that's not quite the same thing as
right.
You know, integrating with a management. So we'll see. I wonder. I shouldn't speculate about this kind of thing, but I mean, I do wonder about the fact that ConnectWise made this announcement, even though they only had the one vendor to sort of highlight, and this wasn't exactly a big splash kind of announcement that they sort of. So you know, I'm waiting to see what kind of momentum builds behind this this particular product. But there is clearly a use case for this kind of solution. So if they can kind of pull it off, it becomes a really interesting. I mean, think about it from a ConnectWise point of view. So they're in the BDR business. So they're not really, you know, it's not like they're looking to make it easier for you to buy from their competitors exactly. From their perspective, what's cool about this is if you support 3 BDR solutions and one of them is ours, like here's another reason to work with us. Because you also have this tool that you can use to manage not only our stuff, but the you know, the 2 other solutions that you're using right now. So, you know, if they can kind of make this all work, I think it's a really clever, potentially useful idea. We'll just have to see how it comes together.
You know, I'm trying to think, has anyone ever successfully done this? Like create a centralized tool that controls other things that have their own tools. I'm trying.
And the additional wrinkle, because I mean, there are tons of management tools that do that. But what's interesting about this is it's a tool for consolidating management of competitors. It's like a, you know, in this case, a BDR vendor coming out with a centralized management tool for other BDR products. I don't know. It's a good question. I can't off the top of my head.
And there's an example that I can think of, and I'm gonna hark back to those who might think fondly of Windows Phone and what the original vision of Windows Phone was, and it was to take a lot of the core services that people use, competitors to Microsoft in some cases, and centralize it into this kind of UI. So, for example, if you would connect to your Facebook account, and then you could do a lot of your Facebooky things through the Photos app, for example. And the vision was, well, the whole point of that you want is photos. So you should just be able to connect to your photo services that you use and have them all there. But then of course, Facebook and all of these other companies said, I want them to use my app. Screw you. Right. So why would we allow for this? So I'm trying to think, is there any example that we can think of that like where this has worked? Or why would these companies like Datto want to be involved in this? Wouldn't they rather have the customer use their own tools? Michael, thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, and I see your point about, hey, you've got somebody who's kind of managing their competitors, and like you guys, I can't really think of an example of that either. And the other thing too that's interesting to me about this is it's interesting. The whole statistic about what is the percentage that are 67% are managing 3 or more BDR tools according to their data. Do I have that? Right?
60.
Okay, 60%. Like that in and of itself is surprising to me. The whole concept of managed services is we're going to try to standardize our customers. We personally run 2 different solutions. At the moment, we're running 3, but that's only because we're migrating from one to the other. So when we're done with that, momentarily we'll be back to 2 again. So that's interesting to me as well. That there's even potentially 3 or more solutions that a lot of partners are managing. I mean, that seems to go against the whole idea of managed services. So, again, like conceptually, if you just came to me and said, like, I don't know, and maybe it's just, being an MSP, like conceptually, if you come to me and say, hey, do you want a single pane of glass? Like my answer before you even finish the sentence for what the single pane of glass is for, it's like, yeah, I want that. And so maybe that's what my reaction is here as well. Like, oh, single pane. Yeah, I want that single pane of glass. Yeah, I need that because I got 87 different tools right now that I'm trying to manage all this stuff through. So we'll see. The other thing that's interesting too is, there are other vendors out there that are even more comprehensive, going beyond just backup, that are trying to pull off this single pane of glass thing. So like LionGuard is one that I think of right off the top of my head, where maybe, I don't know, maybe ConnectWise is even kind of limiting themselves because they're only handling backup. Whereas maybe, a LionGuard can come in and go, yeah, we'll do backup, but we'll also do, 87 other things in a single pane of glass as well. So I think again, I like the announcement and I'm interested to see where it goes. But I mean, it'd be interesting to have this discussion again in 6 months.
It seems like an elusive goal that we continue to talk about, the single pane of glass. Now, if anybody ever actually pulls it off, it's going to be like the One Ring from Lord of the Rings. Like it's like the one tool to rule them all. Right. That company will then control the world.
That's right.
But I don't see it happening personally. But it's good to have aspirations and goals. And but if somebody can pull it off, wow, wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't that be something?
For sure.
Yeah, we'll have to revisit and see how ConnectWise is doing with that particular product as they continue forward. Now, Rich, that's it for ConnectWise news. Any other ConnectWise tidbits you want to share from the show? Did they have good food?
Yes. Yeah. The food was good.
Now, was it actually like a spread of food, or was it like box lunches?
It was mostly individually packaged kind of stuff. There, you know what? It was actually very similar to how we were kind of handling that, where there was, hot food and it wasn't boxed, but it was served to you as opposed to there being like a buffet. And yeah, it's still interesting to kind of watch. And at this hotel right now, they still don't have room service, for example. So we're all still adjusting. We're easing back into the way things were once upon a time.
Yeah, hopefully they get past the prepackaged stuff, because like not a lot of people are going to want to travel to events if all you can get is a turkey sandwich at every event. Food makes a difference.
I don't know. I don't know. There's usually a cookie in that box, and that's what I'm there for.
But you know what? But the cookie is a double-edged sword, right? Because you get excited about the cookie, But then you open the box, and then it's like, what kind of cookie is it? And there's some chef somewhere that was like, hey, I'm going to give them the cookie that I love, and it's like macadamia nut or something. And
Oh yeah,
like,
that's always a bummer.
it's like you gotta go with a good one, and or there's always the I'm okay with oatmeal raisin cookies, but when the time comes and you open the box, okay, Michael, what kind of cookie do you want to see in the box?
Oh, it's got to be chocolate chip, of course.
Classic, right? Like you can't go wrong with chocolate chip. Yet every time I open a box, I get like macadamia maroon or something, like macaroons or something like. Rich, and I bet you like the macadamia nut cookies, don't you?
Well, I won't turn one down, but that's not, what I am really pleased is when I open the box and it's a peanut butter cookie, because peanut butter anything is thumbs up.
They never put peanut butter cookies in the box anymore because there's people that are allergic to them, so like you never see it, right? So you either see chocolate chip or you see oatmeal raisin. Do they have like a fudge? You ever get a fudge brownie cookie? That sounds like it might be good.
No, never had a brownie, but I would eat that.
I would eat that too. See, maybe we need to supplant the cookie with other desserts in the prepackaged lunchbox.
Maybe we need to standardize so we're not running 3 different cookies across multiple lunchboxes and just standardize on a single cookie.
Or if they could even, because they always tell you what kind of sandwich is in the box, but they never tell you what kind of cookie is in the box.
Excellent point.
Sometimes you can see because the boxes are clear, but usually the cookie's kind of wrapped in more plastic or whatever. And sometimes you can't even see in the box. So it says like turkey sandwich, and then you have ham sandwich, and then you have like Caesar wrap, but it never says the cookie. And
that's a great point. Like I would go with a lower quality sandwich to get a good cookie if they advertise that on the box.
I think I would
be
too.
A fascinating research study, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I don't really want the Caesar wrap, but I want that peanut butter cookie. So
that's right.
But the chips are always the same. It seems like every box has the same kind, even though they should pair the chips with the sandwich. Do you really need sour cream and onion with ham? Does that even make sense?
You're saying they're putting the thought into the pairing, like to make sure that the tastes complement each other between the two?
I want to think that that's the case, or are they just randomly grabbing stuff and
I don't know. Maybe that chef impression you did earlier, maybe he is thinking about that stuff.
Oh, Rich, it's time to advance our prepackaged lunches. It's also time to advance to Azure 201. Tell us what that means.
So we are referring here to an article that appeared in a recent issue of the magazine about what we called Azure 201. So Microsoft Azure, there are still probably people who are listening right now who haven't even really kind of gotten to the 101 level in terms of beginning to make Azure part of their business. But certainly every time I talk to distributors, who are in the cloud business, they're always talking about how their Azure business is actually growing quite dramatically, and 4 times a year Microsoft comes out with its quarterly numbers, and the Azure adoption is skyrocketing. So I think we're at a point where we can start looking ahead to that 201 level, that intermediate level use of the platform, because most channel pros who are on the platform now are probably doing things like virtual servers, maybe virtual desktop these days. Azure AD, maybe some SQL Server, Power BI kind of stuff. But there is a ton of things that you can do in Azure, and I mean, I think part of the reason why some people kind of plateau at the 101 level with that platform is there's so much in there that it's just intimidating to figure out what it all does and decide which elements of it you're gonna educate yourself on and so on. So anyway, we did a story about this just to kind of introduce people to the concept that there's probably more you could be doing in Azure than you are currently. And we spoke to some readers who are in fact deeper into Azure, and one of the interesting things they said is don't come to this question so much thinking about What more can I do with Azure? Come to it thinking more about, where next can I take my business? What's a niche maybe that I either am cultivating now or could cultivate? And is there something in Azure that would enable me to do that more efficiently and profitably, and so on? So, and there are, there are tools in there that are vertical specific. There are tools in there that are like IoT specific and so on, machine learning, cloud management, data governance. You can find a market, a need in the market that you will be able to deliver to customers that may even set you apart a little bit from some of your peers who are not doing it. And once you've come up with that concept, then go into Azure and see because there will probably be something in there that could help you with that. All of that said, it's also worth just kind of poking around in there to see what they've got at Microsoft that may be either a supplement or an alternative to something that you're using right now. I mean, there's a BDR product. Azure Site Recovery is part of the Azure platform. Azure Migrate. There's all sorts of data migration, workload migration products from third parties out there, but there's a migration tool built into Azure. Azure Lighthouse, which is a product I don't know very much about, but that is a multi-tenant management platform specifically for MSPs. Probably worth at least taking a peek at. So, I think that strategic approach where you decide what you want to do with your business and then see if there's something in there in Azure that you can dive deep into is a great way to think about this opportunity. But just kind of looking around a little bit, shopping around in the Azure Mall for something that might turn out to be useful is probably a worthwhile thing to do as well.
Yeah, I had to chuckle a little bit when I was reading through this story because they came across a certain statistic, and I'm gonna share my thought process with you here. It said that it estimates the typical ChannelPro is knowledgeable about only 5 to 15% of the entire Azure platform, and I got to thinking, like, I think that's true of everything Microsoft makes, right? Like most people are only aware of 5 to 15% of any Microsoft product at all, right?
I think that probably even applies to Microsoft employees.
Right. It probably does. They probably only know 5 to 15% of what their products do as well. So, Michael, I'll turn to you for comment here because Azure is a gigantic beast of a platform that does all kinds of stuff. Are you heavily invested in Azure? Do you use Azure a lot?
Yeah, so a ton of thoughts on this one. Shot out of a cannon on this one. First of all, we're huge Microsoft guys. I've been very, very closely aligned with Microsoft back to the day I started the company. And so big fan of Azure, love the flexibility that it gives us. Completely agree with this article that it's time to go to the 201 level and go beyond just virtual machines and Azure AD and AD Premium and all that type of thing. The thing that I think people need to think about though, so like I agree 100%. Like, anybody who even says they know everything that's in Azure, like, okay, well, you might have yesterday, but they've released 3 new things today. So like, there's no way that you can possibly keep up with it. So, as the article says, like, I 100% agree, like, figure out what your corner of the world is, of the Azure world, and develop deep expertise in that. Because I think what partners need to think about is the monetization or the opportunity that exists here. So if we think back to this very early days of like Office 365, before it was Microsoft 365, right? It used to be that we would bill the customer directly. We paid Microsoft. We could charge whatever we want, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And now it came down to Microsoft's like, this is what your margin is going to be. Like, that's it. So the way that, in my opinion, that you make money with Microsoft 365 is around consulting services, building expertise, doing projects, migrations, all that type of thing. And so I think the exact same model applies in Azure. Like, unless you're doing huge volume, like, you're not going to make a boatload of money reselling Azure. And not to mention, like, it's also way more difficult to figure out the billing side of Azure than it is, Microsoft 365. I mean, Microsoft 365, I know there's a ton of SKUs out there that you can buy, but realistically, like across all of our customers, there's probably like less than 10 SKUs that we're actually consuming, right? So pretty easy to figure out. With Azure, like, oh, well, if your virtual machine was on for only 22 hours instead of 24 hours, the billing is going to be a little bit like super difficult to figure out. So in my opinion, again, unless you're doing massive volume, like that's not where you should focus your time, effort, and energy and how you're going to make money reselling it. Instead, pick your corner. Much like we talked about with the certified ethical hacker, like make a big investment in training and become an expert in that corner of Azure. And then that's where you're really going to make a killing, is if you are the go-to person in, whatever, throw some of this stuff out, Azure Site Recovery or Lighthouse or, other things that you meant, like if that is like, you're the guy for that technology, then I think there's potentially a lot of opportunity for project work and consulting work and that kind of thing. So I'm such a huge believer in the theme of this article that it is absolutely time for partners to start thinking about Azure 201.
So is there maybe 2 or 3 things that you could say that that Azure does or that you can do in Azure that a lot of people may not know about that might be good opportunities to get them started?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. Like a lot of the things that are mentioned in this article, like I'm not even familiar with. And like I said, anybody who says like, oh yeah, I know everything that's in Azure, like, okay, you might have yesterday, but they've released 3 new things today, and so you don't anymore. And so I think I'm with the other partners that this article speaks to. Like, it's tough to keep up with everything. And to figure out, with the rate at which they release new things for Azure, to figure out like, is that something I should look into further, or is that like doesn't even apply to me type of thing? So, I think I've got work to do here, just like a lot of the other folks that this article is speaking to.
Yeah, it's something you could probably spend a lifetime doing and still never finish.
100%, absolutely,
for sure. But lots of opportunity. Awesome stuff. I think that kind of wraps up our news and information part here, but I'm excited to say we've got a lot more security related discussion coming up, and also talking about some other opportunities there as well in the world of security leadership and the landscape of the cybersecurity market. So we have an interview coming up with Ian Thornton-Trump. Stick around for that. It's a really great interview. Lots of good information coming out of that. Unfortunately, Michael wasn't able to join us for that, but he'll be back with us when we get on the other side. So stick around. We will be right back.
Ready to grow your business in ways you haven't even imagined yet? Tune in to B2B Tech Talk, Ingram Micro's global podcast, to hear what's next in the IT space. Industry leaders, subject matter experts, and more share their valuable insights to provide listeners with the best growth opportunities, with some interesting stories sprinkled in along the way. Listen, subscribe, and follow B2B Tech Talk wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, because it's time to imagine more.
Hey, and welcome back to part 2 of ChannelPro Weekly. Cybersecurity is a top priority for MSPs right now, given the huge rise in threats over the past year. It takes true leadership to devise, plan, and execute security solutions that keep your customers safe. Joining us now is Ian Thornton-Trump, the Chief Information Security Officer at Cyjax and Chief Technical Officer of Octopi Managed Services, to talk about the principles of security leadership and the security landscape today. Welcome, Ian.
Hi, Matt and Rich. It's great to be here.
Great to have you on the show. For those who may not be familiar with you and what you do, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I've been bouncing around both, I would say, the mid-market and the enterprise space as a cybersecurity leader, content creator, and really after many, many years of sort of failure, I now have some insight to offer of taking, the knowledge of the past and turning it into the wisdom of the future. So I'm kind of excited about this sort of new idea of trying to help folks develop leadership qualities within cybersecurity, which, as you guys know, can be a pretty demoralizing career choice and a pretty exhausting exercise for a lot of people.
Yeah, and so you are, and you're from somewhere in Great Britain or Ireland. Where are you from?
Right now, I'm sitting in London, UK.
Oh, the big city. And what kind of fun things do you do in London?
Well, I work from home a lot. I go for walks, and I occasionally take the bus into the office. So, unfortunately, we are still under a government lockdown here in the UK, and have been for almost a year and a half now, as we struggle to eventually bust out and rebuild and clean up all of the things that we've had to do in order to survive the coronavirus.
Now, one of the things that I know about London is that there's like great pubs on every corner that have like English cask ales on demand. There's only one place near me that actually has like an actual English cask ales. Are all the pubs still closed, or are those open at all?
No, they are open. They have been closed a couple of times over the courses of the various lockdowns. And then they did a phase opening where you could go to the pub, but you had to be outside and you couldn't be with more than one group. And now we're sort of almost fully operational, but one of the sort of holdovers is you see the staff wearing masks, and you have to check into the venue with an app. So it is, I would say, getting to about the 80% London pub experience, but we're not quite back to normal.
When we get back to 100%, I'm coming to London because I've always wanted to go pub crawling in the big city. But we should move on from pubs and talk about security. So Rich, you're the one who wanted to have Ian on. Of course, I wanted him on as well. But why don't you set up the conversation on what we want to kind of dive into?
Yeah, and it's interesting that we're talking on Zoom. Originally, when Ian and I scheduled this conversation, we were both going to be at the conference I'm attending right now, the ConnectWise IT Nation Secure event. And Ian, this morning, you had to do it virtually as opposed to in person. But you gave a presentation to the attendees here about the 8 principles of security leadership. And the sort of setup, the abstract for that session tied into something that you were kind of saying before. I mean, there's a particular context for your thoughts on security leadership and why you want to talk to partners about security leadership that has to do with some of the roles that you've played in the recent and not so recent past. So, I mean, maybe set that up for people a little bit. Why is security leadership on your mind these days?
It's actually sort of in a retrospective way due to, of course, the events of the SolarWinds data breach and the fact that I was a bit of the Cassandra. I know the future, but no one will believe what I have to say. And being stuck in that situation of knowing full well that an organization that had the level of cybersecurity that SolarWinds had in 2017 was incredibly vulnerable. And unfortunately, that came to fruition in late December, early January, with the revelation of what is arguably now being described as, the greatest data breach into the United States government that has ever been perpetrated. And we have a long history of those type of data breaches going back all the way to the Titan Rain data breaches of, almost 25 years ago or more. So we find ourselves, a little bit demoralized, I would say, Rich, because, it feels like in 25 years, we haven't moved the ball forward, despite incredible expenses such as, the Einstein program that has been put into effect to watch for the telltale signs of compromise. And just today, we see articles coming out around the basic hygiene of organizations that, we haven't really solved the problem. We haven't really moved the ball forward. And it's my belief that the reason that ball has not moved forward is we miss one vital component of the people, process, and technologies that we describe security as encompassing, and that is a leadership role to pull it all together and to have that 1,000-foot view of the organization's security posture and understand what its risks are, and allow for a cross sort of harmonious approach to moving the cybersecurity ball forward in the organization. Something that I proposed to SolarWinds in 2017, which they ultimately decided they couldn't afford, and they didn't want to make that investment.
So, Ian, you said that you have to have 1,000-foot view. If the office building is taller than 1,000 feet, do you have to go higher still?
Actually, it absolutely is a great analogy, because yes, you do. You have to be, the drone above that building, looking at the buildings next to you, or looking at everything that's going on in your vertical industry, or looking at the specific types of infrastructure that you have and what kind of threat actors may be targeting it. So you're right. It's not just about your own company. It's about this thing that we have called the internet, where everyone is essentially connected to each other. And if I make a cybersecurity mistake, then my customers could pay for it. The folks next door could pay for it. And I don't think we've been incentivized as much. So one of the major components of the philosophical change in approach to cybersecurity is, rather than trying to win, which is essentially in my mind an unwinnable game, is let's try not to lose.
So, what you were talking about at the conference today, a lot of that obviously comes out of your experience with SolarWinds, which is a software developer. A lot of the people in your audience are MSPs, so maybe not all 8 of those security leadership principles apply to an MSP, but some do, I'm sure. So, I mean, what does security leadership look like for an MSP?
I think it really comes down to understanding your customers' risks and helping the customer make the choices to reduce those risks. I had an excellent question from Dan Scott, is how do you start talking to customers around those risks that the MSP perceives, but maybe the customer doesn't understand? And what you need to do is have the conversation with that customer around downtime, and around fines and penalties, and around business disruption. And in order to start that conversation, and ultimately, if you can't start that conversation, or if your sales team can't have that conversation, or the peer group that you might belong to can't penetrate it, then the MSP has to make a really tough choice. And that choice might be, you need to find another provider. Because what happens when security fails at an organization that a MSP is the customer, the MSP gets blamed. The MSP will be called onto the carpet to try and explain what has occurred in that organization. And it usually gets acrimonious at that point, because the company is going to say, or the owner of that business is going to say, well, you didn't tell me that that could happen. And so looking into my crystal ball and having those experiences of saying, listen, you need to have a life cycle management approach to your very vulnerable applications or your old operating systems. There is some mitigative technology that we can put in front of it, but at the end of the day, you're at a lot higher risk of a serious cybersecurity event happening, which could disrupt your business. And in some cases, it could cause the business to go under.
I've been having conversations at the conference here today, folks from ConnectWise, folks with some of the other security vendors who are exhibiting here and so on. Some of them are a little bit more delicate about it than others in terms of how they phrase it. But I think there's a consensus within the vendor community that the sort of cybersecurity maturity of the MSP community is nowhere near where it sort of needs to get. And the only question, maybe the only thing that's sort of up for debate is, how much momentum is there in the right direction and so on. I'll kind of open that up to you as well. I mean, how far, do MSPs in aggregate, understanding that there are some who are really on top of this issue, in aggregate though, how far do MSPs need to go before they're really doing an adequate job of addressing the threats out there?
So I think, when you look at what is now available within the community, including vendor training and CompTIA, obviously with all of the certifications, CompTIA has introduced a number of cybersecurity certifications to assist building the technical knowledge. But I think you're right, Rich. I think the biggest and hardest issue for MSPs right now is the conversations. the conversations around cybersecurity, around risks to the customer that are difficult because they don't have a body of knowledge. And in some places, security is de-incentivized, especially if you still have customers that are break fix. Because essentially you get paid to fix them clicking on a phishing link. So why would you put in a whole bunch of technology to prevent yourself from making money? So there is a cognitive dissonance when it comes to security in the MSP community. Those that are more moving towards being the managed security provider or compliance as a service, which I think is a big emerging trend in the MSP market, are making those investments because they know what the downstream effect is and what that long-term sort of damage could be to that company's brand. And also they understand that if they are making a premium service out of it, that there is an expectation that the customer is looked after. And by looked after in this context, it certainly means secure. It's very hard to justify, charging $85, $100, $125 per user per month without a pretty healthy security stack and a pretty healthy approach to looking after that customer sensitive data and making sure that they have all the tick boxes there for compliance. So I think that's the story now. And, just before we started this segment, Matt and I were talking about how there is now an opportunity for a massive cleanup to take place. We had to do things, terrible things, Rich, during the pandemic in order to keep some businesses alive. And now we have to go and we have to fix our messes, because what's happening now is the cyber criminals are rapidly exploiting some of the mistakes that we made. Some of the old legacy technology that we have in place, like VPNs that are unpatched, as one very large pipeline company discovered was a terrible thing to have, and not having multi-factor authentication. To me, that's the bar now, that if you wanted to have a mantra for MSP in 2021, it's MSP MFA. Everything needs to be multi-factor authentication. Because what we're seeing is folks, we haven't fixed the password problem in the industry. People are still using summer 123, spring 123, and fall 123 because no one can spell autumn. So we're kind of in this situation where a password hygiene isn't going to change. We need to introduce the multi-factor authentication. Then they can use whatever terrible password they want.
We got sneaky though. We've been telling people that you have to put the 123 before the word, right? Then the hackers will never figure that out.
There you go. Yeah.
You alluded to Colonial Pipeline. I mean, so there's been that. There's been JBS. There's been a lot of stuff actually has happened in the security world since you and I last had a chance to speak. How has that changed the market? For the MSPs out there who are doing security?
I think what it's done is it's caused them to up their game from the level of a kind of basic hygiene. Okay. Some of them have taken good approaches, some maybe not so good approaches, but everybody has, jumped on the XDR, EDR bandwagon to a certain extent. Everyone, but one of the problems is with XDR, EDR, if the actual target is already compromised, the XDR, EDR solution might look at that and go, oh yeah, it's totally normal for this one workstation in the network to be talking to Finland all the time, right? So there are, some problems I think that we have. I think our biggest mountain to climb in the SMB space, and that MSPs are basically faced with these nightmares on a daily basis, is the legacy tech stack. The applications, the old client server applications that have to run as domain admin. I mean, just the other day, I ran into an electronic data interface that moves data from one program to another that, you guessed it, was reg hacked so that it logs in as the domain admin, which means the domain admin credentials are available in clear text in the registry of that particular box. Easy to enumerate, easy to get access to, easy to do lateral movement. in the organization if you have domain creds, right? So it's things like this that even in this day with the state of the vendor software, that the MSP is caught between trying to do what's right and just trying to make the customer work without inconveniencing them too much.
You know, I know we only have you for a few more minutes here, but I kind of want to get your thoughts on something else that has come up at the conference here a few times already. That's interesting to me. I mean, and I've really only been here about 24 hours at this point, but I've already heard a number of truly terrifying stories about how ransomware is sort of evolving. You know, I mean, just a few hours ago, I was talking to a vendor, and I won't name the vendor. I don't know how public they are with this, but I mean, they were basically presenting me with some evidence that the ransomware attackers, you know, when you get into a negotiation with them over what they're going to charge and what you can pay, at this point, they're like hacking the cyber insurance companies. They're hacking into QuickBooks. They know, they've seen your books before they get your data. And so they can tell you, well, you know, BS, I know you have the $1 million we're asking for. I mean, that's just one example of several things like that I've been hearing at the show. What are you seeing over the, you know, the last 6-12 months? How are you seeing the ransomware threat maybe evolve and grow even more dangerous?
Yeah, and I mean, you captured some of the things. So to be fair, bad guys are hiring automated bots to probe and look for systems with vulnerabilities. So, and or they're purchasing access off of the dark markets of, you know, poor password hygiene and stuff that's been disclosed, that has been basically has been in a data breach, and selling access to the organization. The bad guys are spending anywhere from weeks to months within that system. Like you said, mapping it out, finding the crown jewels, finding, you know, the most important stuff in the organization, like the SharePoint site and the email system, breaking into the email systems, creating users, doing all of this stuff that should be really detectable. And that's one of my points, is that if suddenly a bunch of scheduled tasks are being created on your domain controller, that's a problem. Because that probably needs a change ticket to do stuff like that. And if there's no change ticket and admin is logging in, that's a huge problem, right? So what we're seeing is some of the attacks are basically, I would say, conducted as APT style attacks, in that there's reconnaissance phase, there's persistence phase, there's exfiltration of data phase, and then there's the wham bam, thank you, here's the ransomware package that we've deployed across your organization. So what the cyber criminals have done is they've mirrored their advanced persistent threat adversary tactics and really become a lot more aggressive. And like you said, you know, they're now demanding ransoms that are on the edge of the pain threshold for organizations. So they truly have to make that terrible decision of, do we pay it to prevent sensitive data that we had from being linked, even though we have a working backup solution and could restore all of our machines. So they have, again, sort of like countered the tactics that we talked about even 2 years ago, which was have a robust backup solution, have an offline backup solution. You get hit by ransomware, just go ahead, reimage your boxes and you're back in business. That's changed now. And so they've taken advantage of things like the California Data Protection Director, the CPD, and then, you know, GDPR here in the UK and the EU to focus on the sensitive data that they know an organization will pay a premium price to prevent it from being disclosed.
It's terrifying stuff, but good information to have. I think you've also highlighted one of the other major problems that we have is that hackers are awake too much. We need to restrict all sales of energy drinks, so that way they are up less and can do less damage when they're awake.
It is kind of, in a way, that tactic has some merit. So as an example, what you can do is restrict certain hours of access and certain system access by time of day, right? Now, a lot of these advanced persistent threat groups try to mirror regular IT activity. And actually, it may not be a technological problem that victimizes a company by ransomware. It may very well be poor change control practices and poor configuration management that leads the bad guys to get inside your system and bypass all of that security that you spent a lot of money on. So this is what I talked about in my presentation about bringing together the processes, the technology, and the people, because the target of criminal actors and advanced persistent threat is in the realm of IT. It's not in the realm of security, right? And so what they're targeting is your network admins. They're targeting your developers. They're targeting those environments. Security is just sort of almost considered a janitorial staff in a lot of ways. We're here to do the cleanup after, somebody barfs all over the IT system, and so, we're late to the party, a lot of the time. And this is where I'm really trying to push forward the idea of using leadership to get a proactive response to reduce those silos where the malicious actors live and thrive, and really start coordinating efforts across the enterprise to deal with security. If security is not at the table during project management meetings or procurement meetings or governance and risk discussions, then you're going to be the cleanup crew, and it's going to be a terrible existence for you.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you hit a lot of great points, and I wish we could go on, but unfortunately we're out of time. But Ian, if anyone who wants to reach out to you, learn more about you, some of the stuff that you've written, where can they go? Where can they find you?
Two places are great. I mean, I'm all over LinkedIn with a lot of posting, a lot of content. You can follow Cyjax on LinkedIn. You can follow me personally on Twitter at @fat_hobbit. That's fat with a PHAT. I put out a lot of commentary and comments these days, because at the end of the day, you know what, you're only as good as the people that that can help you. And I think that's where we need to work as a community of MSPs and vendors and trainers and all of the other people that make up the channel. We need to start working together, because if we don't, that figure of 6 trillion in cybercrime losses for 2021 is going to double very quickly.
Yeah, scary thoughts there too. I 100% agree. But anyway, thank you so much for coming on and joining us today. I hope we get you back, because we could probably go on this for another hour at least. With that, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, Rich and I will be back with Michael Cocanower on the other side of the break. So stick around. We'll see you in just a few. And welcome back to part 3 of ChannelPro Weekly. Rich, that was an awesome interview with Ian Thornton-Trump. I really do hope we get him back, because we could have spent at least another hour talking about cybersecurity, and he's so knowledgeable about that stuff. And plus, he also has some uncanny ability to take something ridiculous that I say to try to make him laugh and turn it into like some kind of serious insight. That is a skill that I've never seen, and that's amazing.
It is true. It is true, isn't it? That there is almost no sort of setup or lead in that will not eventually get him to a really interesting point about security.
Yeah, awesome stuff. Any takeaways that you have from that interview?
No, I wish we had a little bit more time to get into that ransomware discussion that we had towards the end there. Because that is one of the smaller sort of takeaways from the conference here, is that, mostly what you hear about in the media is the volume of ransomware out there, which is increasing. But the ransomware is also growing more dangerous. The people who write ransomware are getting more creative. They're doing more dangerous, interesting things. So it's not just that there's a ton of ransomware out there, but that dealing with it is actually getting harder and harder, and the repercussions are getting more and more serious. And I'm sure Ian, if we had given him some more runway, he could have really opened our eyes to some of that.
Yeah, now Michael, I know you weren't part of that particular discussion, but I want to ask you one thing that we kind of asked Ian, and that's, of all of the threats that are out there right now, like what keeps you up at night? What do you foresee as the most dangerous threat?
Well, I don't know so much that it's a specific threat, but what's interesting to me is to watch the continuing evolution between cybersecurity professionals and criminal syndicates. And so if we take ransomware as an example, it used to be in the old days, like, hey, I'm going to come in and I'm going to encrypt your data. And then, our side said, oh yeah, well, we're going to back it up. So we're going to, just kind of ignore you when you give us a ransom. And then the bad guys went, oh yeah, well, then I'm going to encrypt your backups too. And then we went, oh yeah, well, then I'm going to store my backups offline so you can't get to them. And then the bad guys went, oh yeah, well, then I'm going to exfiltrate all of your data and I'm going to publish it on the dark web and, publish that you were hacked and embarrass you and all that kind of thing. So it's just this continuing kind of one-upsmanship. And I think that keeps me up to a large degree. I mean, the fact that in order to exfiltrate a large amount of data, the threat actors have to be, resident in the network for an extended period of time. And so, like, I think about that a lot with our customers. Like, how am I going to know if somebody's in there doing bad stuff? And if they've got our full tool set, I will know because I've got SIM and EDR and all these other things that will detect that activity. But what if they don't? And what if there's a criminal in my customer's network right now, exfiltrating data, preparing to launch their attack a couple of weeks from now? And then also, like, what are they going to think of next, right? So what's kind of the next evolution? What's the next step in this process? So, okay, so now my reaction has been, oh yeah, well, I'm going to put, EDR and SIM across all my environments. So I'm going to detect your exfiltration and I'm going to block your attempts to encrypt and all that kind of stuff. So how are the bad guys going to react to that? And then, what am I going to need to do next? So just kind of this constant ongoing back and forth.
There is a lot of that for sure. And, the hard part was you're talking about that is that, a lot of the attacks now, they have to be in the network a long time, which is easy, which gives you more opportunity to detect. The problem is as you said, that if you don't detect it, they could sit on that. Like, they could breach you and sit on it for 2 months before they actually, before you even know about it. Right.
Absolutely. So 100%.
Yeah. So it's scary how long they have to kind of comb through the data and really plan what they want to do and how they want to embarrass you, as opposed to just trying to get in for a moment to plant something that's going to encrypt everything. And then they can just send you a ransom note. So scary. That is scary stuff for sure. So great insight there. And, hopefully the good guys like you can stay one step ahead of the bad guys.
I hope so.
We do. So it was a great interview. And before we wrap, I definitely want to take a moment here to play a small game with you called 5 Questions. I was trying to remember if we played this with you last time, but if we did, then you should know what to expect. But if we didn't, I'll tell you what it's about real quick. So Rich and I have a little game we play, and we will come up with 5 questions off the top of our head. That's the goal. We can't write them in advance. We have to think of them on the spot. So and as we learned last week, Rich, sometimes the questions work and sometimes they don't. But that's the fun of having it done in kind of real time and on because we're in the hot seat as well as you. But nothing embarrassing, no gotchas, just stuff to get to know you a little better and have a little fun. So
I'm ready.
He's ready. Rich, I will give you the first question. I'm being nice today.
Michael, you mentioned early on in the show that you have a lot of pent-up travel energy. So where's the place you are most eager to travel to?
Next trip that's coming up is I hope to see the Macy's 4th of July show in New York City. Fireworks show.
Very cool.
Macy's 4th of July fireworks. Very cool.
That is if the flight doesn't get canceled, because American Airlines is canceling flights right and left at the moment, and that's who I have my tickets with. So my fingers are crossed.
Oh, no, they're canceling. Why are they canceling flights?
Short staffed. They can't get enough people to,
Yeah, we've been seeing that everywhere. Everyone is short staffed. Like, you can't walk in front of any business without seeing a help wanted sign out, which is pretty crazy. All right. Earlier you mentioned Godzilla, so I'm gonna go down that path. If you could be any monster movie character, which character would you be and why?
That's a good question. So I'm not a big monster movie guy. And I don't know if this qualifies as a monster movie or not, but I think maybe I'd go with Hannibal Lecter. Just because, and is that a monster movie? Like he's not a monster in like a Godzilla sense, but he was kind of a monster. But just because like his criminality was based on intellect and intelligence rather than like Godzilla, just I'm gonna swipe my paw and take out a building.
Not quite the monster I was referring to, but I'll take it. I'll take it. It's a good one. Rich, question. Rich, do you like monster movies?
I've never been particularly into. I mean, we could probably come up with one or two that I really have enjoyed, but no, not a big thing for me.
Yeah, they're usually pretty miss more than they are hit. Although the King Kong one was pretty good. I don't know if you watched the King Kong one. Maybe Michael, maybe you would be Mothra, because I think you like bright, shiny lights.
I don't even know who that is.
Well, now I guess you can go find out. Rich, question number 3 to you.
So not only is travel coming back into people's lives, so are movies. So you cannot have popcorn. What is your snack of choice?
If I can't have popcorn?
Yeah.
I mean, like, come on, that's a difficult question. So I'll tell you the first thing that came into my mind, but then maybe I need to come up with a better answer. The first thing that came into my mind is I like so much butter on my popcorn at the movies that literally when I get to the bottom of the bag, there's like a pool of butter left in the bottom of the bag. Like that's how much butter I put on my movie popcorn. So the first thing that came to mind if you said I can't have popcorn is like, maybe I'll just get a bowl of butter and eat that with a spoon. Not the healthiest thing in the world, but and I'm not even sure if that works without the popcorn. Like maybe you need both of them working together. But if I can't have popcorn, gosh, because normally, to be honest with you, it's a bottle of water and a popcorn. So I mean, a bottle of water, which is like incredibly boring.
No, I'm the same way. I mean, it's all about the popcorn at the movie fair. But if I can't have popcorn, I'm going with the red vines.
Okay.
Red vines. So do you salt? If you were just to have a bowl of butter, do you put popcorn salt in the butter too?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, this is uncharted territory for me. I think I would have to do some A/B testing there.
Maybe you could dip a cookie in the butter.
Oh, I'm in. I'm in.
Are you having butter cookies, but like
yes,
literally butter cookies?
I am in.
This is pretty interesting. All right.
And of course, like this doesn't even address the topic of like, is that actually butter that you get at the movies? Like, what exactly is that they're putting on top of the popcorn? Because it doesn't look like butter I have in my house.
That's true. I wonder what is that kind of substance?
Some type of synthetic something. It's better not to ask.
It's probably like raw hydrogenated fats.
Something,
that's dyed yellow.
Right.
But it does taste good, doesn't it?
Yes, for sure.
Interesting stuff. All right. Question number 4 to me. I'll stick down the movie path because I don't know where else to go. We are finally starting to get some new movies, which is kind of nice because there's basically been nothing to watch over the last year. Any notable movies that you've seen or are going to see that you're excited about?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I am not a huge movie person, and I was kind of behind on movies even before the pandemic. So, and then now with the pandemic, like that's not even on my radar screen at all. I mean, just to be completely transparent, like I don't even have a Netflix subscription. So I am just not not a ton of time that I spend sitting in front of the television. So I couldn't even tell you what's in the theaters right now.
Then I ask alternate question number 4 then, because I'm not going to let you off the hook that easy.
Okay.
If there was any alternate career that you could have chosen, what would you do?
Yeah, so I got a number there. I mean, the first is I would love to be a Navy fighter pilot. I think that would be cool. I was on a path coming out of high school. I actually got a full ride scholarship from the Army, but it was only a 3-year scholarship. And the only qualifier was I had to do well my first year, and then the last 3 years would have been paid for. And I decided going to class really wasn't for me my first year of college. So I completely flunked out and much to my parents' chagrin, lost the scholarship. But I am fully convinced that had I completed that scholarship, gone into the Army as a second lieutenant, that I would have been a career military guy. And so naval aviator is something that I think would be really cool. Interesting statistic for you guys. The United States Navy is the only Navy in the world that is capable of landing planes on an aircraft carrier at night.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting.
Those guys are cool. So I think Navy fighter pilot would have been it.
That would have been a neat career for sure. You'd be like real life Top Gun.
There you go. That's exactly it.
What would you, okay, so 4B, what would if you were a Navy fighter pilot, what would your call sign be?
Gecko.
Love it. Love it. Because you...
In recognition of Gordon Gekko from the movie Wall Street, to tie it back to your original question about movies.
Awesome. I thought originally first you said Geico because they just saved you 10% on your car insurance.
Yeah,
so you
no.
Question number 5 to you.
Oh gosh. Money is no object. Where on planet Earth do you retire to?
You know, to be totally honest with you, when I think about that, really what I think about is I have a skill set related to technology, security, all this kind of stuff that we've talked about today. And I feel like somewhere in the world, there is somebody who is trying to solve a big problem, whether it's related to poverty or hunger or disease or whatever else, that potentially my skill set could help contribute to the solution. And so, you know, money being no object is not such a thing for me. It would be more about, I would love to just go somewhere and be able to contribute in a meaningful way to solving some type of a significant problem by contributing my unique skill set where it's needed.
That unique skill set being professional cookie taster?
Yes, that is exactly what I was thinking.
Awesome.
Well, I'll go hand out blue ribbon cookies to starving children in whatever country you want to name and solve the hunger problem that way.
Just make sure they're good cookies because we've already gone down that road.
I will vet them thoroughly. You can be sure of that.
No macadamia nuts.
That's right.
Well, we're so anti-macadamia out here. I didn't want to imply that like I don't like macadamia nut cookies, but it's always the disappointing cookie. But let's not listen.
I couldn't agree. Couldn't agree more.
Let's not go down that path any further, though. But thank you for playing, Michael. Rich, why don't you tell us what we missed and what might be coming up down the road?
Yes, indeed. Well, if you want to know what you've missed, the thing you need to do every week is read our In Case You Missed It post. It appears on ChannelProNetwork.com every Friday. It is written by our own James Gaskin. This week, he is going to provide some news from the other big conference that happened this week that I wasn't actually able to attend because I don't have that kind of control over time and space. HPE Discover, their big partner event took place. You'll get some news from them. You'll get some news about the expanded distribution agreement between Pax8 and Nerdio, two companies we're familiar with here. And then he will share his thoughts on something you may have seen in the news. The person who went into a thrift shop in the UK bought a $4 painting, and it turned out to be a painting by David Bowie that's worth millions and millions of dollars. You know, it happens to all of us all the time, I guess, that kind of thing. James will share his thoughts about that. Looking ahead to next week, there's actually not a ton happening on the conference front, except Mobile World Congress. Next week is Mobile World Congress in Barcelona with live actual attendees. So I suspect there will be some mobility and mobile hardware news to talk about next week.
Yeah, usually a lot of phone news coming out of that. So that'll be interesting to see. And of course, in we're just a couple weeks away from our Atlanta event, aren't we, Rich? Tell people about that.
Yeah. No, we are doing a series of what we call regional events this year, 6 of them in all. And beginning with the last one we did in Dallas and continuing in Atlanta and beyond, we're going to be in Boston, we're going to be in Raleigh, North Carolina, we're going to be in Southern California. These are all hybrid events. So we welcome you to join us in person at a nearby hotel. If you prefer to consume the content online, we make it available to you that way as well. We've got sessions in there about increasing cloud computing margins. We've got a session on zero trust security, which I know is very popular with the audience in Dallas. There is a sort of Q&A session about sales and marketing challenges that we're calling Stump the Sales Pro in there. So lots of really good relevant stuff. If you are in or anywhere near Atlanta, please join us. We'd love to see you.
Yeah, if you're in the Atlanta area, come to the event. It's we've got all the social distancing stuff still going on. It's very safe, but we want to definitely get people there to check it out, because it's time to get out and start living again for sure. Big thanks to Michael Cocanower, CEO of itSynergy, for joining us here today. Michael, it's always a pleasure having you on. I hope you had fun.
I did. Thanks, guys, for having me. I really enjoyed it.
And for anybody who wants to learn more about you, get in touch with you, how can they do that? Where can they go?
Our website, itsynergy.com, is the best place to go and learn all about us.
Fantastic. Thank you again for joining us. And of course, thank you all for being here with us, Rich and I, for ChannelPro Weekly. The best thing to do is go subscribe. We're everywhere you get podcasts, so just go and hit the subscribe button. That way it just shows up in your phone magically every week, and you can listen wherever you are and whatever you're doing. If you'd like to watch, we're on YouTube. Subscribe there, hit the bell to get notifications so you can join us and see our bright smiley faces as we do this show. And of course, ChannelProNetwork.com is the website you want to go to. Set it as your homepage. Go there each and every day to get news, articles, white papers, resources, downloads, all kinds of stuff to help make your business better and to help you grow and make more money and stay on top of what's going on, because this is a rapidly changing industry. And of course, if you're interested in any of our events where you can do that in person or virtually, events.channelpronetwork.com is where you can find out information, and we hope to see you at one of those. So with that being said, we will see you all in episode 191 next week. See you then.